Hey everyone, it's Kelly here. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time, welcome back if you've been before. Lovely to have you either way. On this channel, we talk books, and today I am recording a wrap-up of the month of April. In April, I read 5 books, and this is going to be a Stella Prize shortlist heavy list of books because I was attempting to read the full Stella Prize shortlist before the winner was announced. Now, I'm recording this just into May, so it is now the 3rd of May. The winner was announced last night, Thursday night, and it was Alexis Wright's Praiseworthy, which is one that I did not finish because it's so long. It's so long. It's over 700 pages. I'm doing my level best to get through this book. I'm also not particularly enjoying it, so I'm hoping that as the book goes on that it gets more compelling, because at the moment I'm finding it very repetitive and really hard to get into, and the writing style is very different to what I'm used to, so I'm struggling a little bit. But congratulations to Alexis Wright for winning the Stella Prize this year. I am going to talk about some of the other shortlisted books that I read this month. I had already read some. Let me just grab my little Stella Prize bookmark because it has all of the long-listed books on it. So prior to this month, I had read The Swift Dark Tide, which was shortlisted and I absolutely loved. I gave it 4.5 stars. I'd read Graft, which didn't make the shortlist. The Hummingbird Effect also did not make the shortlist. So this month I managed to get through, I think, 3 of the shortlisted books. So let's talk about those, as well as the other books that I read this month. So the first book that I finished in April was Feast by Emily O'Grady. I don't have a physical copy of it. I borrowed it from the library and I have now returned it. So this book is about a woman called Alison, who is a retired actress living in Scotland in a secluded old manor with her musician partner, Patrick. Now, Patrick's teenage daughter, Neve, has come to stay for her gap year, so the year between finishing high school and moving into tertiary education. On the weekend of her 18th birthday, her father throws a lavish feast, if you will, for her, and her mother Shannon flies in from Sydney, Australia. So what I thought about this book was, none of the characters are particularly likable. Well, I mean, maybe that's not quite correct. It's more that they're all just kind of terrible in their own way, except maybe for Shannon, the mother, who is planning to fly in, drop a bombshell, and then leave. Although I guess in her own way she's also a bit terrible as well. But she's also, the reason for her terribleness is fair. I'm trying to say this without spoilers. The story also felt a little bit disjointed, and the character of Alison felt really chaotic in that there sort of seemed to be 2 very distinct versions of Alison, which seemed incompatible. Like, they seemed like they weren't just kind of like 2 sides to Alison. They felt like 2 completely different characters, and that was off-putting to me in reading this book. Also, the story does become increasingly disturbing, but ultimately it was very forgettable for me. It was fine, but I didn't love it. I gave it 3 stars. But it was definitely okay. However, given that this was shortlisted, I guess I was potentially being more critical of this book because it ended up being shortlisted over some books that I really loved, including Graft, which I felt should have made the shortlist. So, I was questioning its place in the shortlist, as one does when you're reading a prize long list or shortlist. You're comparing, you're being more critical, I guess, of of the books that are in that shortlist, because you're thinking this took a place in a shortlist that this book could have been in. So, you know, that's how it rolls for me. So yeah, it was just okay for me, this one. Okay, moving on to another prize list, which is the Women's Prize. Now the shortlist has come out, and this book has made the shortlist. It's Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. And I listened to the audiobook version of this, which was narrated by Simone Collins. So, what did I think of Soldier Sailor? Now, I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here, because I know that this book has been beloved. And I also know that a lot of people who are mothers, which I am not a mother, but people who are mothers are identifying with, I'm hoping, just aspects of this story, because some quite disturbing things happen right at the start of the book. So I don't believe this is going to be a massive spoiler, but if you haven't read this book and you don't want to hear anything about the plot, then maybe just skip over this one while Soldier Sailor is up on the screen. So, hang on. Let me backtrack a little bit. Let me give you a little bit of a synopsis. So, we have two characters really in this book, and it's told from the perspective of a mother who is referred to only as Soldier, a nickname, I guess. I'm assuming that's not her actual name. That'd be a bit weird. Anyway, so she's reflecting on this sort of real seismic shift that has happened for her in becoming a mother. And it feels a little bit like an open letter to her son, who is referred to as Sailor. Again, we don't know if this is a nickname or his actual name, but Soldier Sailor, I guess it sort of has its own little kind of literary poetry. So we've got a cat exiting the area. So in this letter, she's sort of talking about what has happened for her in those kind of early days of motherhood, and then also kind of through into toddlerhood. And at the time of writing this open letter, the son is maybe 4, I think it says in the text. I can't really recall specifically, but about 4. So he's sort of gotten through the worst of being a toddler and being chaotic. And he's probably settling a little bit more into his personality. So her husband is portrayed as being a bit of a useless prick, who doesn't really help out very much, and sort of leaves everything to her to do. And it's really obvious that she's suffering from, and I think maybe even from postpartum psychosis. Somehow she makes it through. But there is something that happens right at the beginning of the book, and this was the spoiler I was telling you about earlier, where she feels the urge and almost goes through with, in fact, begins to go through with abandoning her son in the woods, and kind of running off. Or at least that's how it's kind of told, like it really happened. However, some stuff that happens later in the book is told like it really happens, and then it's clear that it didn't really happen. It's sort of stuff that's going on in her mind. So I don't know for sure if this really does happen for her, or whether this is her imagining herself doing it. But I'm taking it as a given that she did do this. Leave her son in the woods for somebody to find him. Like, always with the intention of someone finding him and taking him and raising him. But, and then I believe she was potentially going to kill herself. It's hard to say. Anyway, that happens. She has remorse and decides that it can't happen. And then we go into a very dark period of her life where everything is just chaos and she hasn't had enough sleep and blah, 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 blah. So I'm guessing that it's more that side of things, the not getting enough sleep, and maybe your partner's not as helpful as they could be, or, you know, all of those kind of things that people are identifying with when they're reading this book. I really hope it's not the psychosis, because, you know, if people are experiencing postpartum psychosis and getting no help, that's really not very good. And I guess, you know, like, I don't want to sort of say that doesn't happen very often, blah, blah, blah. We know it happens. But you would hope that there are mechanisms in place in, in your country's medical system where you've got checks and balances to make sure that if someone is experiencing psychosis postpartum, that there's some support there for them. But I guess maybe I'm speaking from a place of privilege because I feel like that sort of thing would definitely happen in Australia. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if in your country that's definitely not the case. But anyway, the husband doesn't really do much about it. He sort of is suspecting that his wife might be going through postpartum depression. And he suggests that to her at one point, and she gets really mad at him for suggesting it. But he never does anything further about it. Like, he never follows it up. And if you're really that concerned about your partner, would you not call the doctor? Like, I don't know. It just sort of felt like he didn't really care enough to do anything about it. And also, just overall, this book kind of felt quite indulgent to me. There were some, like, really good observations in there. But there was also a lot of waffling on. There isn't much plot in this book, not much happens, and there's a lot of rage there that ends up dissipating as she stays with her useless husband. So it's frustrating from the point of view of, like, this guy is doing, like, he's not helping at all, and he's telling you that you're doing a bad job, basically, and having fights with you about it. Why are you still there? Like, that just seemed really odd to me. Also, the ending of this book felt like sentimental tripe to me, and I'm not a sentimental person, so maybe that's just me because it's not my thing. But yeah, I just... Ugh. Also, there was an incident in the book where the husband and wife were fat-shaming a child in IKEA and his father for no reason. Like, it wasn't necessary to the plot. There's an incident that happens at IKEA and it's really nothing to do with that kid and his father, but they're just, like, making these observations about how lazy and horrific this child and father are for, like, no reason. It just made me think, wow, these people are awful. I don't know. And also she criticizes the use of, like, a baby voice, when talking to children, and how, like, it really felt like she was being very critical of mothers being mothers. Like, it just seemed, and sort of that kind of instinctual softness that you put into your voice when you're talking with a child, like that was in some way a bad thing. And it just seemed, it was a bit of a yikes kind of moment for me. Anyway, I did not really enjoy this book. I gave it 2.75 stars. There were definitely some moments of good writing in there, but, like, it just, to me, there were too many negatives in there that just didn't really gel for me, which I know is going to be controversial because everybody seems to love this book and is giving it 5 stars left, right, and center. So for me, it just wasn't for me, I guess. Maybe it's because I'm not a mother, I don't know, but it certainly made me feel really good about my choice to not have children. Is that the point? I don't know. You tell me. Anyway, so that was the second book that I read this month. The third book, however, was one, I guess, that redeemed the reading for this month, because those first 2 books were 3 and 2.75 stars respectively. This one was a 4.5 star for me, and that is Body Friend by Katherine Brabon. This one is one of the shortlisted books for the Stella Prize. Hang on, I'm going to shift to this side because I think that it's shadowing me on the other side a little bit too much. So this is, as I said, one of the books that was shortlisted for the Stella Prize. Unfortunately didn't win because this was one of the ones I was really hopeful about. But it did not win. We'll move on. I'm feeling a little bit salty about it at the moment. It's probably a bit too raw. Anyway, this is a book about a woman who leaves hospital after an operation and starts, as part of her kind of therapy to following on from this surgery, which they never specifically say what the surgery is, but she seems to have this sort of condition that is like a lifelong condition that is causing her to need to have surgeries, and she probably will need more as time goes on. So it's a chronic illness, I guess you would say. But she leaves the hospital and starts swimming in a sort of therapy situation. So she goes to these aquatherapy sessions, and there she meets a woman called Frida. And soon after, she meets another woman called Sylvia as she's going for a walk in a local park. Now, these two women that she meets also seem to have either the same chronic illness as her or something similar that is, they both have these chronic illnesses, but they deal with them in very different ways. So Frida is very much the kind of person who is like, you got to keep moving, you got to keep building your strength. If you stop, it's all over Red Rover. Whereas Sylvia is very much like you need to honor your pain and honor where you are that day, and really values rest and recovery. So they both have these very different ideas about how you should deal with your chronic illness. And while our narrator, who is never given a name, is with each of these women, she sort of becomes, is sort of taken in, I guess, by their approach to things, and is very much in the moment of like trying to embody what each of these two women kind of expect of her. And I guess in some ways they're kind of projecting onto her their own biases and what they think she should be. So to me, this book really rang true to what it means to live with chronic pain. The reflections that our narrator has on these two like realities that she's oscillating between, I felt was so insightful. On the one hand, permitting yourself to need rest, and on the other hand, needing to do something to feel in control, was so relatable. I guess as I kept reading this, I just kind of felt it ringing true to me about this experience of chronic pain, and sort of what other people expect of you, and sort of the guilt that you feel because you're not fulfilling what you imagine other people expect of you, and sort of, I guess, that kind of difficulty of working out who you are and like how your pain and chronic illness define you as a person. So yeah, this was just amazing to me. I really, really liked it. I know not everybody is going to get along with this, but it really rang true, and I have been recommending it to people in my life who have chronic illness and chronic pain, because it sort of felt so real to me, and like the reflections that the main character has felt insightful, like in ways of kind of reflecting on your own situation. So I loved this. 4.5 stars from me. Okay, next book was a book that I was reading for a book club that I'm part of, where we're reading around the world. If you've been here before, you'll have heard me reflecting about various books that we're reading for different countries as we attempt to read a book from every country in the world. This month we were reading a book from Austria, and the book was this one, Old Masters by Thomas Bernhard. If you watched my vlog where I was on holidays and reading on holidays, then you would have seen me talking extensively about this. So I won't go into too much detail about it, but we have an old grumpy man, essentially, who visits an art museum in Vienna every other day and sits on the settee before the same Tintoretto painting for hours. One day he asks his closest friend, Arzbacher, to meet him there on a day that's not a normal day for them, for an unknown purpose. So, Arzbacher is our narrator, and he is sort of telling us a little bit about this character, and also... Hello. I got a cat about to jump up on the table here. She's thinking about it. Go on then. Okay. Anyway, so Artsparker is our narrator, and he is telling us about his friend and, you know, a little bit of background about his friend. It's only... Okay, here she is. Sorry, my cat has just jumped up on the table, so she may pop in and out of the frame as we go. Anyway, so Artsparker is telling us about his friend, and he's telling us, you know, the background information, and about halfway through the book, they actually meet, and then they're having a conversation. Or I guess Artsparker is listening to a monologue from his friend. So this book is very much... You right there? Okay, no, you can't sit there. You can't sit there. Ay. All right, sorry about that. So Artsparker is listening to, I guess, more of a monologue from his friend rather than actually having a conversation with him. And a lot of this book is very much ranting about the government and about art and about music and about criticism, like as in like being a critic. And yeah, it's definitely not for everyone. So quite a few people in my book club DNF'd this book because they weren't all about that, listening to old grumpy men ranting about things, which is fair enough. And he is a bit of an annoying old bugger, but there was something endearing about him, I felt. I will say that the book does get quite repetitive, and that stream of consciousness style that this is written in, it does take a bit to get into the swing of, but the wry humour in here really suited me, so it worked. It worked for me. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it in the end. We'll move on though, because I have already spoken quite extensively about that book on this channel. The next book that I read, and actually this is the final book, yes, the final book for the month of April, is another shortlisted book from the Stella, and that is Hospital by Sanya Rushdi, translated by Arunava Sinha. This is a book about a woman. I would say it's called fiction. To me, this sort of seems like maybe autofiction, because the main character is the name of the author, and I suspect that a lot of what she's writing about is very reflective of things that have actually happened to her. But yeah, so I'm classing this as autofiction. Anyway, this is about a woman who is a former PhD student, and she's diagnosed with her 3rd episode of psychosis. She's eventually sectioned in the hospital, where she reflects on her mental state and the way she's being treated in the hospital and by her family. And sort of, I guess, she's sharing what it's like to be in psychosis, but she's talking about it in a really reasonable way. So I felt like in this book there were some really insightful reflections amidst the sort of confusion and jumping thoughts, because this is very reflective. I mean, not having gone through psychosis myself, my guess is that this is quite reflective of what it's like to be inside the brain of somebody who is in psychosis. And yeah, it definitely does feel like autofiction. I don't know that this book would be for everyone. I think the writing is quite accessible in the sense of it being relatively straightforward and simple writing, but this sort of like jumping between things and not really being sure about what, because this is essentially quite an unreliable narrator because she's experiencing psychosis. So some of the things she's talking about as though they're happening, it later turns out are definitely not happening. You know, and they are part of her psychosis. And so these sort of like paranoias that she has, even some of the interactions she has, it makes clear aren't actually happening. And she's very confused about that. And sort of it adds to this sense of like stress and paranoia. So if you're not in a headspace to be reading something like that, I definitely would say avoid this one. But yeah, it was really interesting to sort of follow her train of thought as chaotic as it was and unreliable as the narration was, just to sort of see her kind of moving from like a lot of chaos and things that probably definitely didn't happen, through to it sort of, you know, being medicated and being treated for that, and then sort of, I guess, coming out the other side of that psychosis. And then, you know, coming towards the end of the book, and this is possibly a spoiler, I don't know. It's a very short book, so it's hard to talk about it without giving away what happens. But, like, even at the end, where she is out the other side of the psychosis, you can see that she's sort of heading maybe towards another bout of it, or, you know, is definitely kind of still working through some stuff, and maybe it's an ever-present thing for her. So yeah, this was a really interesting read. I know it won't be for everybody just because of the topic, but I gave it 3.5 stars. Alright, that is my wrap up for the month of April. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that you have enjoyed hearing about these 5 books that I read. Let me know down below if you have read any of them yourself and you have thoughts to share, or if you strongly disagree with me about any of them. Look, if it's Soldier Sailor though, I'm not going to change my mind, I don't think, about this book, so don't try and argue with me down in the comments. But I would be interested to hear your perspective if you are someone who really loved that book, and to sort of hear about what it was about it that really worked for you, because it sure as heck did not work for me. Alright, thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye!